Well, he's led audits across a continent. He's navigated risk in some of the biggest balance sheets on the JSE. But now, as Andrew Mackie prepares to sign off on his own final chapter, the most important audit he's ever undertaken, and that's the final chapter at work, obviously, because there's a whole new chapter opening, is personal. And this is Life Chapters, Money Choices. And in this episode, we're going to unpack the story of a man who spent decades getting the numbers right for others and then turned that same precision inward to plan and to prepare purposefully and to transition into retirement. And it's not just about stepping away from work. I believe he's stepping into purpose, from Land Cruiser Dreams to life coaching and reading Halftime by Bob Buford. Andrew's journey is a playbook in intentional transition. So Andrew, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got Kim Potgieter in studio again as well. Kim, great to see you as always. Andrew, tell us a little bit more about how you became enthralled to the love of auditing before we talk about your retirement journey.
I guess I just stumbled into it. Being a chartered accountant in South Africa is a really, really good career option for any young person who wants to get into business. And I managed to get into a great firm, and I found out I was good at it, and I really just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the interaction. I enjoyed the client work. Frankly, it was just an incredibly privileged way to do life, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was an adventure and continues to be an adventure. I haven't yet left the firm, but I am plotting around what life looks like afterwards.
And that's why we've invited you on, because you haven't just been plotting for the last few months. I believe Kim tells me you've been planning this for the last 7 years. When did you start turning that forensic focus on your own retirement plan? Was there a trigger, or did the auditor and you always plan 7 years ahead?
Now, there was a distinct trigger, and I had always believed, in fact, I'd said to the guy I was reporting to when I was running the business that I'm going to run as hard and fast as I can for as long as I can and not look over my shoulder, and firmly believed that the better job I did, the more options I would have in the future. But there was a point, it was December 2020, we were down on holiday, and I just believed it was time, something happened, to start actually thinking about it and giving myself permission to carve a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but just a little bit of time to actually start thinking about what my next might look like. So there was a trigger point, and I took that trigger point seriously and put some interesting things in place. And the more I went down that road, the more enthralled I got about the potential of a meaningful life post an employed life.
And a meaningful life. I mean, you've read Halftime by Bob Buford, and he's embraced that idea of moving from success to significance. How critical was that process and reading about that philosophy in your journey to that point?
So that was a very crucial point, just grasping that. And that's quite hard to do, because that alone on a piece of paper is, well, so what do you do with it? And what does it mean? So I was really fortunate in what I did in 2021 is I engaged a friend of mine who's a coach to put me through a whole bunch of disciplines. Light touch, this is not heavy work. This is a couple of hours a month, Saturday afternoon stuff. And took me down a journey with the use of friends and others to speak into my life with what they'd seen and to ask a bunch of pointed questions as to what it is that I was good at, what they'd seen me do, what are the things particularly bad at, and what should I be avoiding, and putting everything into what we called the funnel. And we put all of these things in the funnel and kind of see what shook out over a period of time, while there was no urgency, there was no need, there was nothing coming down at me, but just actually building up slowly a shape of what this thing. A very, very nice way to phrase the significance thing, which I learned was, I've had a career where I was important, and that's been okay. But perhaps now is the time to have a life of being important to others.
That's powerful.
That was a very big shift. So, and that resonated with me. And then, so what does it mean for me to have a second half motivated by being important to people?
Kim, when did, and that really is a powerful statement that resonates deeply with your personal philosophy and the way you advise clients as well. And we were talking at a time when we've just had a very significant transaction announced on the JSE as well, a huge philanthropic act in curate and Yanni Mouton. And again, it's through that lens of, how do I be significant to others? I think, very often, especially for men, we become so defined by that identity in our workplace. Who are we? Who is Andrew Mackey? Who is Michael Avery? And how do you then transition that into, well, who are we going to be without that label? So maybe you can just take us back to the first meeting and how that conversation went.
I think when I met Andrew for the first time, we connected because we were sharing such a similar philosophy. So his journey had led him to Bob Buford, Halftime, Success to Significance. And part of my process that I do with people when they're anticipating change is I use the graph from that exact book on how do we start a parallel life and how do we step back and look at, well, what is it we're trying to achieve? Why are we always thinking about what we're coming from? Let's rather think forward about, what we want the next chapter to look like. So we resonated on that note of helping, working together to plan that parallel life. And for me, it was also... for me, it's so rewarding when I meet somebody else that's prepared to put the time and effort into what they're going to. So we spoke the same language, and I think we just connected because I could see that there was going to be such a rich future ahead. And, many of the discussions went off around what was the true definition of wealth and what was this all for? And having those philosophical conversations became something that we did on a regular basis. And I grow as much from learning from clients that I'm working with, and then I get to share it. So, yeah, always great when you meet a like-minded spirit.
And, beyond the numbers, Andrew, I think if you read Bob Buford's book, it starts with this nagging discontent that there is more just to life than material success or the title that one has acquired through a successful career, which is important. When you sat down and interrogated that, did you find that an uncomfortable position to be in initially? And take me through that work that you did, because as you said, it wasn't difficult work, but you have to be very intentional and disciplined.
I think that at the time of starting this work and shortly thereafter, I had a significant career shift. So I was seriously busy and really engaged in my day-to-day and loving it. And then I took a shift into something else that I was really, really privileged to be able to do. So there was no push factor coming out, but there was an awareness that it was going to end. And then what? And I started with the firm as a 19-year-old, 18-year-old VAC student. By this year, it'll be 40 years. So I started to wrestle with myself. Who am I? As you said, without the role, without the title, without the firm, without the identity of the firm. Who am I in the middle of the night without all of that around me? And I felt I needed to do something. The other thing that had happened around about that time is we had a very busy time and a wonderful time with 3 sons, going to school, private school, all that type of, and busy. But that was almost a premonition of what was going to come, or like a sneak preview, because you leave that era and it falls away. All of a sudden, there's no rugby on a Saturday morning. There's no that. So what I needed to start thinking about. Wow, this be like falling off a cliff unless I intentionally curate what the next bit needs to be. Like death and taxes, retirement is coming.
Yeah.
Right? It's coming, right? So you then end up with time. And I think there are 2 ways to think about time. The one danger, you think about it like Peter Pan, that it's never ending. But then what do I fill it with? Or an awareness as well that there will be another end.
Yeah.
And therefore, every day and every moment is precious.
Yeah.
And how do I intentionally fill that in ways that are meaningful for me? Get out of bed with a sense of purpose. but also doing what I think is to be important to others, because I've had my time of being important.
And let's just touch on that for a little bit more, because what does being important to others mean for you? I mean, you've got 3 children, you've got a family. Is it maybe also giving back from a mentorship perspective in your professional role? What does that mean for you?
I think it's all of that wrapped up. So I think it's a portfolio life of doing the kind of being available firstly to our sons, to the extent that they need, but they're in their 20s and doing their own stuff, but wanting to be available, wanting to enjoy family time, family holidays, being there in the next season. There is certainly an opportunity for mentorship, and so one of the things that I did last year is I studied executive coaching. I put myself through a course at Henley University and on my way to being an accredited ICF coach, and I'm currently have the opportunity to do that in my professional life and loving it, and frankly learned a whole bunch of stuff I wish I'd learned a long time ago. But I also think once you start experimenting with this stuff and getting into that mindset, things come your way. So I've been appointed to a board of a UK-based charity which does incredible work across the world in 50 of the most difficult places on the continent. In the world. And I joined that board and firstly loving it, but giving back, and I think I'm contributing positively. I think I'm important to that body of people. But it certainly gives me a lot more than I give it. I've realized my knowledge of global geopolitics is woeful, but fascinated by what I'm learning, and I'm just being inspired and reading books I would never have read before.
Yeah. And that's the kind of portfolio life, Kim, that we discussed a few episodes back. And it doesn't, and it can never really just be about one thing. You have to look at what you transitioning into holistically. And I think Andrew's example is a fantastic example in practice of someone who's thought so deeply and intentionally about this. What is important in Andrew's story for you, for listeners to bear in mind if they want to start being as intentional as Andrew has been?
So maybe the first thing for me was that he was listening to that inner voice. So whenever I spoke to him, it wasn't so much of the ego that was driving all of these decisions. He was spending the time actually to get to know himself again. And it is an inner voice. And, I always say it comes from your gut, but, it's coming from inside. So he was listening to that voice. He wasn't shutting it out. Because when we don't like change, what we do is we shut out all of that. But instead, he took the time to listen to it. That was the first thing that really struck me on the path. The second thing is, and you're hearing all the time, he was intentional. He gave it time, even though he said it was a few hours on a Saturday afternoon. He gave it time, because most people, when I speak to them, they go, Kim, I'm way too busy now. As soon as I retire, I promise I'll give it some time. I'm going to take a year sabbatical. It was my first year. And in that time, I'm going to do all this discovery work. And if I could stress one big thing, that is people's big mistake. Don't do the planning once you're in it. Do it parallel before. Yes, your work is so urgent, but it's important you working out what your next chapter is.
Why is it important to do it ahead of time? Why can't we just say, oh, but we're working now, I've got my nose deep into 3 projects and, multiple different things. And, when I retire, I'll have time. And then I can worry about all of these things.
So from my side, what I've seen, I've been doing this work for 20 years now. And what I see happening is when we take that sabbatical starts off as a few months, then it becomes more, and then it becomes more, and then it becomes more. Our contacts have then gone. The people that we were mixing with, we're not mixing with anymore. And my big one is our confidence goes. So once our confidence is gone, it's so hard to come back in and start this work that you really want to do. So my big encouragement is not to wait until you're in retirement, but rather to start this parallel life like Andrew did.
From your perspective, Andrew?
Look, I think Bob Buford in his book makes a point. The moment you retire, no one takes your call. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because the world continues. So one of the opportunities is when you are still employed and you have the benefit of a big brand name behind you, that you can do seismic testing, right? And put in calls and build a network. And I've had a huge amount of fun just meeting people for coffee and those are now good relationships, but they would have been a lot harder to establish if I were already retired. It's much easier to do it when you're gainfully employed. And those meetings are not just with my own self-interest to carry that relationship forward into retirement. There's benefit now, but it's just, I probably wouldn't have been as intentional about those coffee meetings if I wasn't already thinking about the second half.
Yeah, and these things, it's such great insight, such rich insight that they don't happen by accident, by chance, that you just think, well, it'll be this natural thing. I've worked my entire life and I'll find something to keep me busy. And it is a lot harder when you don't have, the title and the brand name, to Andrew's point. And also, the energy and the confidence, I think, is one that perhaps we don't think about as much as we should in that. And I've seen it you can take this back to often when I have female friends who've left the workplace to raise children, and how many have struggled to get back into the workplace because they've been out for a year or so or 2 years, and you lose that confidence, you lose some of the network, and it does become almost exponentially harder the longer you stay out of work. Andrew, I want to come back to your money stories that you've kind of told yourself throughout your career, and it's something that Kim and I touch on quite frequently, is that we're so shaped by those conversations we had as children with our parents around the dinner table. What were your earliest money stories or memories that you had?
I think my money story was built very much around a strong work ethic, and my parents worked really hard to fund my brother and sister and I through university. And kind of Scottish philosophy of good things comes to those who work hard, and I think that has been true for me. I've put in lots and lots of hours over the last 40 years in my career.
Success crowns labour.
Exactly, but also been taught to be prudent and kind of live within the means. Save for a rainy day, all of the kind of words of wisdom from an astute Scottish father, which did enable me to kind of prepare for what is coming and have options at retirement. And fortunately, I'm not in a position. I'm in a position which many people aren't, where they kind of have to keep going to 75 or 80 and keep doing something. I am in a privileged position now but I still wrestle with myself at night and keep saying to Kim, is it enough? What if? And she laughs and she says, you'll be okay. But it's not, it's certainly not billions, that I could. But I think it's just about being diligent over a period of time, but really wanting to now put the two together to kind of say that it's more important to me as to be time rich. Yeah.
And is that, in Andrew's case, Kim, is the challenge here? And yes, recognize that you're in a very privileged position, but you work with a lot of people who've been diligent and are in a privileged position. Now the difficulty is now maybe loosening the reins a little bit and maybe not being as profligate and frugal as they have been building up to this moment.
And let me tell you how difficult that is, because we don't change. So you talk about learning from a Scottish father and that whole thing about having to work hard and seeing your value because you're working hard. So the biggest thing for Andrew, and we chatted about it, I'm not surprising him with this news, is that he's going to be his own worst enemy on this, because he's going to want to work hard. And when he is taking some time off just to do play things and just to have fun, he's going to have to keep reminding himself about the work he's done, because his natural instinct is he's a provider. He needs to work hard to feel his worth. So his journey is going to be in the next chapter, like a little bit of, when I'm having fun, that's good. When I'm giving some of my money away, that's good. As opposed to this fear of the scarcity that does come into us when we're taught by our parents that if we're not working hard, we're not of value.
How have you tried to confront that internally? Because it's a deeply, it's core to who you are.
Like, I still have work to do in that front. I'm not kind of yet comfortable that I've cracked the nut on that.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable in terms of my thinking. I'm comfortable in terms of creating an epic. I'm comfortable in terms of wanting to, what I'd like written on my epitaph. That type of that I've done. Bring it really back to the nuts and bolts and being able to wake up and say, there's no paycheck coming in this month. That frightens me, and there's work to be done.
What can we do to help support that kind of work, Kim? Because I absolutely hear you, Andrew. I'm going to be in a similar boat. I can feel it because my work is so defined, and that kind of Calvinist work ethic is just core to who I am. So I haven't even started with the kind of work that you've been doing. But what are the tools we can use to help soften that entry process?
So in the beginning, there's a lot of support work from having the proper financial planner that you're working with, because that financial planner must and should understand where you're coming from. Because when you are going, and you'll have days, Andrew will have days where he'll go, are you sure this is going to be enough? Am I not overspending? Am I not being, isn't what I'm doing frivolous? And in the meantime, if he's got the person that can have those conversations with him. So you need to be meeting regularly in the beginning, and I think more regularly until you just get comfortable, because when you start not having a paycheck coming in, you've got to condition your mind that all the money you've invested and those investments are your paycheck. And the reason that you're sitting in this privileged position is because you have those investments that can pay you a paycheck. So it's just like your paycheck coming in. And guess what you have to remind yourself is you worked for that. It's not somebody else that worked for that. So many times when I meet people, especially when they're young and they come in their 20s and they tell me that their company wants them to put away a certain amount of money, they already start dissociating that money from being theirs. They go, my company is taking this money off mine, and they try and make it their minimum offer. Often they want to go the least amount. And I always go, but that is your money. That is your company helping you with discipline to put it away. And then I find when people get to retirement, they seem to think that that's somebody else's money. It's not somebody else's money. You have worked for it. Your discipline has got it there. Your consistency's got it there. So it is that mind shift to own that money first of all and see that as your hard-earned money. So you're not slacking off. You've done it.
But isn't there also a fear? And we were talking before we started about, the time since the Second World War, which you learned about in school, Andrew, versus the time today. And it's kind of been a longer period. And it just kind of puts into perspective where we are. But we were very much, and your generation and my parents' generation were shaped by that scarcity mindset that followed from the war as well. And so is there a fear that even if you've got this figure that you think is going to be enough, that maybe if you're putting it in a living annuity, a market's crater, and the Fed doesn't know what it's doing, and look at what gold is doing. Are those the kinds of things that keep you up at night as an auditor?
Exactly the kind of thing. Is it an air pocket? I mean, there will be market volatility. Is it an air pocket, or is it going to be free fall? And that's I guess a little bit of knowledge is dangerous, and that is the fear. But I've also got. I kind of balance that with a bit of faith and a bit of purpose, and that'll kind of be okay. Yeah, and if the worst comes to the worst, I'll knock on someone's door and I'll find something to do, but I'm not. What I'm not prepared to do is to compromise that which I want to achieve with my life, which is a certainty, in response to a potential uncertainty in the market. I'm more inspired by the adventure, and there is no epic, no adventure without risk, right? But I'm more inspired about the adventure before me in the days that I have left than the risk. I could continue earning an income for the next 25 years.
Because the work
but I
that
would
you
be
do
feeding
is
the beast.
Knowledge work, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be feeding the beast, right? But I don't know that's would result in looking back on my last day of the life that I chose to leave. I've had 40 wonderful, wonderful, wonderful years. Wouldn't change a day of it. But I do think it's time is coming to do something different.
Well, I'm excited to hear that. I really am. And I think that fear, if we all know if we live in a life of fear, we're not going to get the results we want. And I from all the work you've done, Andrew, and watching you, I can see the most exciting chapter ahead for you. And I feel privileged to be able to support you on it.
Yeah, and thank you for your honesty, Andrew, because I think that is a fear that you've just articulated that is so real for so many people, and you have to confront it head on. But then beyond that, I think tap into that motivation. What is it that excites you beyond the fear? Because that ultimately is what will get you over that hump of the fear. And then if all else fails, just go and read The Triumph of the Optimists, which is, I think, Credit Suisse, over 100 years of equity market performance, asset classes, all different kinds, shares, bonds, equity. Over time, over longer than 100 years, equities have outperformed every other asset class. There will be market volatility, but the sun will rise tomorrow. And if it doesn't, well, then I think the whole world's going to be pretty much in the same boat, because then you're talking about World War III or something similar. So don't let that stop you from going out and pursuing that dream. So, I mean, how far away are you now?
I am probably a year to 3 years.
And is there a particular framework for this end component now that you're focusing on, or? I'm
working it out. I'm trying to work out when, rather than waiting for the music to stop playing on the carousel and getting off when it stops, is kind of working out when the right time is to get off the carousel.
On your own terms.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big step. But because you've been planning so intentionally, and there's that word again, I think it's a step that you can see you're ready to make, and you're in that headspace where you're ready to make it. The Land Cruiser, are you going to go overlanding?
No, not heavily overlanding. None of that. We just want a car to explore this beautiful country that we live in, and have the space and the time, and it's comfortable, and love the journey, and kind of say, oh, we're in Cape Town already, it's too soon. We want to just experience the journey and kind of be just have a lot of fun and a car to do it in.
Yeah, and it is. I'm biased, but it is the car to do it in. And South Africa has got some of the greatest passes. If you go to the Cedarburg, if you go down Swartberg, Prince Albert, all of those places. For you, Kim, what is the big lesson in Andrew's story? I mean, obviously it's about planning and planning ahead and being courageous. For me, certainly, tackling those things that often we defer until the date of retirement. For you, what has been the big lesson in working with Andrew?
That he's given himself choices. That is his intention, and his preparation work has put a whole lot of choices in front of him, and he gets to choose which of those paths he's taking. And for me, that is what it's all about, is that we have those choices, but we need to put the work in to get those choices.
And I've got to ask you, Andrew, if you were giving advice to other professionals listening who maybe haven't started interrogating when the right moment is for them, or how to even approach this journey, what would it be as a parting thought?
I think our parting thought would be, as hard as it is, carve out the time and do something with it. So practically go to Spar or Pick and Pay and buy a black book and go to a coffee shop and start to get your stuff down on a piece of paper. That's where I work. I mean, other people would hate that, but for me it's been a very practical way of, when the book's staring at me and I haven't opened it for 6 weeks, well, maybe it's time to and it's chipping away over time, thinking and being cognizant that like death and taxes, retirement is coming, right? And you can fear it, think I'm going to fall over the abyss, or embrace it and create an epic adventure. But it doesn't happen on its own. And in the same way that you plan an overseas trip and you get the family together around the coffee day, it's the same discipline that is required. But there hasn't been when I talk about discipline, it's a joyful discipline. I've never gone for a cup of coffee for half an hour and doodled in my book and come and thought, man, I've always come back inspired by this incredible adventure that life is. Incredible adventure that life is.
Has anyone ever thought planning for an epic adventure or a holiday is a chore? No, it's in the planning that we find some of the greatest joy, isn't it? Where are we going to go? Learning about the places. If you're an Airbnb, maybe we're going to go and stay, learn a bit more about the history. It is in those processes that we actually find the great joy. And I think when you tap into that, you do see this next chapter as exactly that, creating your epic.
And it might work out nothing like what I think it's going to, right? It might, but that's okay too.
Well, that's the beauty.
That's okay too. You know, it's going to be whatever the next, and in my head, Mike, it's kind of, I'm seeing 20 years into kind of, you know, my early 80s. I'd like to think. I mean, the other interesting thing is this thing on how you see yourself age-wise. And one of the big tips I've got is just, you know, accept chronology, but reject what the number means, and always think of yourself as 10 years younger. So, always think of yourself as 10 years younger.
Age is just a number.
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, it may sound trite, but it absolutely, anyone who, and yes, we experience time logarithmically, and it does slip away faster. The more the numbers seem to roll over. But I still certainly feel like I'm in my early 30s, and it is exactly that, harness that energy to start planning and doing it now. But before you lose some of that energy as well, I think is a great point. But I also think life, yes, you spend one half of it planning. I think that the other half is realizing the futility of those plans sometimes. But therein lies the beauty as well. But you do have to do the planning in order to put yourself in a position to have the choices that you now have before you, Andrew.
And I think, Mike, it's grasping the opportunity before you. Because I think for most of us, we kind of stumbled into our careers and our lives. Went to school, you went to university, it didn't matter whether you went to UCT or Wits, or you went through, you got a job that kind of came your way. And you carved a career and opportunities, and it was wonderful and brilliant, and you had your family, but you didn't really, or there are very, very few people who took the opportunity to kind of pause and change tack completely if that's what they wanted to do. What this process does well is to say, really, I have a whole stack of choices in front of me. I could choose to play golf 5 days a week if that's what I want to do. I would imagine you'd get quite tired quite quickly. But there is so much, it's such a big planet with so many cool people to share the adventure with. But it doesn't happen on its own. And the danger is by not thinking it through and giving yourself the privilege of thinking it through, that it's less than it could be.
Andrew Mackie, on that, I think we'll leave it there. Fantastic sharing your insights, your journey, and here's to your epic adventure. I'm sure it is going to be epic in every sense of the word, given everything you shared with us today here on Life Chapters Money Choices. Been a real pleasure having you in studio.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kim. It's been great fun.
Well, I think this conversation just goes to show that audit trails aren't just for companies, they're for legacies too. And Andrew Mackie's journey reminds us that sometimes the most important review isn't in the boardroom, it's in the mirror. And the most meaningful report we'll ever file is how we chose to live once the spreadsheets were closed. If this story moved you, please share it and start your own audit, because the future isn't waiting for anyone. The next chapter is certainly yours to be written, and we trust you're enjoying this new podcast, Life Chapters Money Choices, with me, Michael Avery. Take care.